our friend, the judge, J. Michael Luttig, joins me now. Judge, good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Ali. It's a pleasure always to be with you.
You have said, Judge, that this moment is unlike any that we've seen to test the judiciary the way it's being tested. What makes this more dangerous, for instance, than previous constitutional crises like Watergate or even McCarthyism?
Ali, Judge Graber's words were an extraordinary plea from a sitting judge, historical. And the similar plea is being made by other judges, state and federal, across the nation today. These pleas would never have to occur if the Supreme Court of the United States had reassured America that it sits in order to prevent this kind of tyranny in the United States of America. But as you know, the Supreme Court has done anything but reassure America. That's why, for the first time to my knowledge in all of American history, the federal judges and also the state judges now have no choice but to speak directly to the American people through their opinions, I must add, rather than speak only to the Supreme Court of the United States. There is never been a time in our history like this, Ali, for the federal judiciary. Never before has the federal judiciary and even individual judges of the federal courts been savagely attacked by the President of the United States of America. His aim is clear. It's to delegitimize the federal courts in the eyes of the American people and to intimidate the federal courts into ruling in his favor. But as I said in that clip that you just ran, the lower federal courts of the United States, by which I mean the federal district courts and the U.S. courts of appeals, will not be intimidated by this president and his attorney general. They will, to the person and to the court, honor their oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
You've offered that praise of lower court judges for honoring their oath under this historic level of pressure, including threats to their lives and their safety. You're very influential. If you could speak directly to the Supreme Court right now and to Chief Justice Roberts in this moment, what would you ask of them?
The Supreme Court and the Chief Justice of the United States have no higher obligation to the country or to the Constitution than to condemn the vicious attacks on the federal courts and even on individual judges of those courts in the world. Until or unless the Supreme Court condemns these attacks and begins to decide cases under the Constitution as it is obligated to do, rather than to acquiesce in Donald Trump's lawlessness through the shadow docket, this will continue in the United States of America.
Judge, you're a conservative, and some critics have argued that judges speaking directly to the public, breaking that traditional judicial reserve, breaking that fourth wall, might be seen as partisan or a form of judicial activism. Now, clearly, you have spoken out since January 6th, 2020 about these matters. But how do you address that? How do you address the idea that the courts have to retain their legitimacy in the eyes of the American public, while at the same time taking a stand to uphold democracy and prevent a slide into authoritarianism?
Well, that criticism, and I've not heard it, is absolute silliness. What the American people have to understand is that the foundation, the pillars of our nation, as set forth by our founding fathers and the architects of our Constitution, are under assault today. It is a paramount obligation of the federal judges of the United States, all of them, including the Supreme Court, to condemn what's happening in America today. It's not political at all to do so. That's what Donald Trump wants people to believe. Nothing about what's going on today and that we're talking about is politics at all, Allie. This is, as you say, truth, and it is about the law and the Constitution of the United States. Donald Trump has successfully convinced many, many millions of American people that it's all politics. It is not politics. None of it is politics, Ali Velshi. And the American people must understand that.
You, prior to January 6th, you chimed in on this on Twitter to sort of give Mike Pence some cover to do the right thing because you're that influential. If you had put something, if it was your first set of tweets, and when you do something like that, important people stand up and listen, including judges. Judge Graber urged Americans to hold on for just a little longer. What do the rest of us who are not judges and lawyers do to support everything you've just described about heroic judges and jurists?
There is nothing as a practical or political matter that the American people can do until or unless the Supreme Court of the United States begins to address what's going on in America today. I don't expect the Supreme Court to do that, Ali. And if and when it does not, then as I've written many times before, the only thing that remains is we, the American people. It's we, the people, in whom all power resides under the Constitution of the United States. If the Supreme Court is not going to come to the aid of the country at this point, at the most important moment in history, when the country needs the Supreme Court of the United States, then all that's left is for we, the people, to take back the country through elections and other protests, such as those of the No King's Day, Ali. We have no choice. The Supreme Court has left us with no choice.
I want to ask you about all this talk about a third term. Clearly, the 22nd Amendment is a pretty clear amendment. That said, do you take it seriously when Bannon and those folks talk about the fact that Donald Trump will be the president after the elections of 2028?
Well, Ali, as you know, up until the day that the Atlantic released my article, there had never been any suggestion, to my knowledge, by either the president or Mr. Bannon, that the 22nd Amendment limited the president to the 2 terms or to the 2 elections to the office of president that he's been elected to. It was only within 12 or 15 hours after my article ran at 7 a.m. that day that the President of the United States, on his way to Korea and aboard Air Force One, lamented what he reads that the 22nd Amendment prevents him from running for election again. Do I think that would stop him? No, not at all. As between the President of the United States and Steve Bannon on this issue, I would believe Steve Bannon in an instant. Steve Bannon knows, as does the president, that the Constitution prevents him from running again, but they've known that all along.
Yeah.
And all along, for 8 months, they've been hinting that the president would run for election again. So I believe today that there's a likelihood that Donald Trump will run for election for the president again. And as I say in the Atlantic article, he has amassed near absolute unchecked power in the United States, power that would enable him to run for election, be defeated for the presidency,
Right.
and nonetheless be the next president of the United States of America also, Allie.
That's the thing we have to look out for. Judge, thanks again for your article, and thanks, as always, for joining us on the show. Judge J. Michael Luttig is a former federal judge for the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit.